It's Wednesday, February 25th, 2026. Let's take a look back at the State of the Union address next on the AM Update. Clocking in at just under 2 hours, President Trump delivered his first State of the Union address of his second administration. We're just going to go through what I flagged I thought was interesting and caught my eye during the nearly 2-hour speech. Let's start here. President Trump started off the speech, of course, by seeing Al Green, a congressman from Texas, being escorted less than a minute into his speech. Of course, President Trump, as every president basically does, also said this.
And for all of these reasons, I say tonight, members of Congress, the state of our union is strong.
Whoever the audio tech is was probably sweating bullets for about the first 10 to 15 minutes. President Trump's microphone was clipping pretty badly there. During the first few minutes of the State of the Union address, President Trump also welcomed in the USA men's national hockey team, really to a great fanfare and choreography, having them come in and enter through the press gallery. Of course, the optics here of the U.S. men's national team, the gold medal winners in the Milan Cortina Olympics, is that they, as I said, entered through the press gallery, so none of the press, of course, was clapping. And then the cameras panned over to the Democrats. Very few of them were clapping for the U.S. men's national team. By the way, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, only senator to shake President Trump's hand. President Trump spent a relatively short amount of time speaking about the economy. He touted tariffs. He touted some employment numbers as well. He bragged about the tax cuts. That was the first uh-oh moment from the Democrats as President Trump pointed to their body and said, it's these guys who have voted against no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. And then the Democrats started clapping for that, clapping that they had voted against tax cuts for tips and overtime. President Trump also addressed the issue of data centers, saying that he's signing an executive action that will allow all of these big tech companies to provide their own energy for their data centers. Now, that's a creative idea. I'm not sure of any big tech companies that's going to, put $500,000 or $1 billion into a new data center that's also going to spend another $500 million or $250 million building their own power plant. But we'll see where that goes. President Trump also called on Congress to ban investment firms from buying up and snapping up homes. He also touted border security, saying 0 illegal aliens had been admitted into the United States, touted the fentanyl flow crossing down by about 56%. Largest decline in history, lowest number in 125 years as far as immigration and illicit activities over the southern border. President Trump also hitting the Somali fraud scam, I should say. The cameraman, whomever it was, actually panned to Ilhan Omar, Minnesota Congresswoman, Little Somalia Congresswoman, as Trump delivered these remarks.
The Somali pirates who ransacked Minnesota remind us that there are large parts of the world where robbery, corruption, and lawlessness are the norm, not the exception. Importing these cultures through unrestricted immigration and open borders brings those problems right here to the USA. And it is the American people who pay the price in higher medical bills, car insurance rates, rent, taxes, and perhaps most importantly, crime.
All of that is obviously true, and good for President Trump using that bully pulpit to call it out. On some of the networks, as I said, Ilhan Omar was on camera as President Trump delivered those remarks, and she looked like she was about to cry. Probably the most stark moment of the night was this. When President Trump, yes, this is manipulative, but it's for a good cause. It's to illustrate just how far the Democrats have fallen. Listen to this.
So tonight I'm inviting every legislator to join with my administration in reaffirming a fundamental principle. If you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens.
In response to that charge from President Trump, to stand if you agree with the statement, the first duty of the American government is the protection of American citizens, not illegal aliens. Stand if you agree. I think maybe 2 or 3 Democrats stood for that. And President Trump wisely just let the moment linger. Again, this entire time, the cameras catch the Democrats not standing up to make sure in no uncertain terms the American people know where they stand. President Trump also, in no uncertain terms, called on the Senate to pass the Save America Act. Rashida Tlaib, Congresswoman from Michigan, Ilhan Omar, the aforementioned, both got into a screaming match, or at least attempted to get into a screaming match with President Trump. President Trump also delivered this humdinger of a line.
Why would anybody not want voter ID? One reason, because they want to cheat. There's only one reason.
Yep. That's really the only reason. Only reason at all. After about the 3rd or 4th obvious moment where if you're just an American, you should probably clap for something. I can't even remember what this came after. President Trump had enough of the Democrats' petulance and anti-Americanism.
Nobody stands up. These people are crazy. I'm telling you. They're crazy.
Bold colors, no pale pastels. Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar again tried to yell and heckle the president. The parents of Irina Zarutska, the Ukrainian immigrant girl who came here to America to escape war-torn Ukraine and was brutally murdered by a multi charged and convicted criminal who was out on the streets again. The mother of Irina Zarutska was in attendance as President Trump honored the life of her daughter in a very powerful moment as Irina Zarutska's mother wept and wept some more as President Trump honored her daughter and remembered her daughter. The Purple Heart was handed out to National Guard Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, who was injured in the terrorist attack in Washington, D.C. late last year. Also, President Trump recognized a former prisoner of Nicolas Maduro who made it out alive after the United States' powerful operation capturing the dictator. Perhaps the most powerful moments of the night were when President Trump handed out 2 medals of honor, a very, very impressive and important show. You don't get to see that, at least not for living recipients, very often. One was a part of the aforementioned raid on Venezuela, where you'll recall, I think it was reported at the time, there was 1 American casualty, not fatality, but a casualty. Well, President Trump last night introduced us to Chief Warrant Officer Eric Slover, who spent a great deal of time, we're told, planning the raid on Nicolas Maduro's compound. He was hit in the raid of Maduro, but made it out alive. We also heard the story about how his wife was so worried about him during this very dangerous trek inside Venezuela that she had his helicopter blessed with holy water. And to see those two on screen, both Eric Slover and his wife, just an all-American couple. Chief Warrant Officer Eric Slover, if you see a picture of him, he looks like he could hop into a Marvel movie tomorrow and play Captain America. So that's on the younger end. Also, on the older end, a World War II veteran, a 100-year-old World War II veteran, Navy Captain Royce Williams, also given the Congressional Medal of Honor from President Trump. Captain Williams, Royce Williams, fought off 7 Russian fighters in a 35-minute dogfight during the Korean War. He was also a veteran of World War II as well. So, here's what stood out to me. This is not particularly uncommon for State of the Union addresses to be trying to be unifying in tone. Here's what's uncommon about this State of the Union and last year's speech address to the joint session of Congress. President Trump, prior to getting into politics, this is just objectively true. The dude has a gaudy aesthetic, a big, bold, golden aesthetic that he loves. And he's put his name in unmistakable, large letters, large font, in-your-face writing on some of those gaudy, brash, humongous buildings all over the world. That is true. He has a certain style about him. He likes himself quite a bit. But he's been typecast as something that's beyond that. He's been typecast as half the people in the room last night as a megalomaniac, sociopath. And he's just not that. I've heard too many stories, firsthand, secondhand, from people. He is anything but that. Has a certain talent for, 1, making deals, but 2, making people in his presence feel like they are, real people. That they matter. And that's part of his first talent, which is making deals. But he's been typecast that's something beyond the kind of megalomaniac, or the big brash, I should say, aesthetic that he loves so much. He's been typecast as something more dark and sinister than that, and that he's just not that. Here's what's unique. The same guy who loves that big, beautiful, brash, bold, in-your-face aesthetic in a previous life, and who has been typecast as something darker and more sinister than that in this era of his life, has said very little about pronouns, specifically one type of pronoun, I. The Donald Trump who loves himself some Donald Trump, both last year and this year, said very little about I. To the extent that he did, it was almost always, it's my pleasure to fill in the blank, or I have the honor of fill in the blank, as he praised heroes and honored others. It also makes the Democrats' petulance, both last year and this year's, all the more stark. The man that they have been typecasting as some sort of evil, megalomaniac sociopath, right to their faces, spoke very little about himself, and instead spent the entire time talking about others, honoring others, praising heroes. All the while, they gifted him favor after favor after favor after favor. As President Trump shines a spotlight on what should be in a functioning society, objective good things. Like, I believe the not Border Patrol, but Coast Guard young man during the flooding last year around Kerrville who saved lives. It's an objectively good thing. Or at least it should be in a sane, functioning society, and they wouldn't clap for things like that. Now, by the end, they kind of got their wits about them, and they started clapping for those Medal of Honor recipients. But I digress. President Trump, typecast as something that he's not, very much loves him some him, very much loves the bold, brash, in-your-face aesthetic during a previous life, is anything but that in these speeches. And it makes the Democrats look very, very caught off guard on their heels, and they look like children, frankly. That's going to do it for a Wednesday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.